When faced with a sudden insult or a barrage of rude words, the instinctive human reaction for most is to fight fire with fire. However, the deeply intuitive soul takes a completely different path. They look past the burning flames of the insult and peer directly into the ashes of the person delivering it. Instead of lashing out, they mentally pause and search for the root cause of the bitterness. They understand a profound truth about human nature. Much of the cruelty we see in the world is simply unhealed pain wearing a mask of anger. Someone who hurls insults is often battling invisible demons, carrying deep-seated frustrations, feelings of profound inadequacy, or emotional burdens they cannot articulate. Recognizing this, the empathetic soul often responds not with retaliation, but with an unspoken offer of grace. If they can perceive the underlying struggle, they will gently try to address the source of the frustration rather than engaging with the hostility. It is a deeply selfless act, akin to a healer stepping onto a battlefield to tend to the wounded, fully aware of the flying arrows. They are strong enough in their own identity to extend a hand, knowing that true strength is found in lifting others out of their own darkness. Yet, they are also incredibly observant and possess a high degree of social awareness. They know that trying to reason with a storm is a futile endeavor. When a person is blinded by rage or irrational bitterness, their judgment is clouded, and no amount of logic will pierce their armor. In these heated moments, the deeply empathetic individual excels at the art of diffusion. They despise unnecessary conflict and the toxic energy it brings into a shared space. So, instead of meeting aggression with aggression, they might introduce a gentle, perfectly timed diversion. With remarkable intelligence, they can weave a subtle thread of humor into the conversation, drawing upon a shared human experience that everyone in the room can relate to. This is never done to mock or belittle the aggressive person, but rather to break the heavy tension in the air. By allowing the room to collectively exhale and perhaps share a small, recognizing smile, they starve the fire of its oxygen. The aggressive individual suddenly finds themselves standing in a calm room, their flames extinguished not by force, but by the overwhelming power of collective peace. It is a masterful way to protect the harmony of the group without wasting precious spiritual energy on a pointless argument. However, we must never confuse this profound commitment to peace with a lack of courage. There is a distinct line that, when crossed, calls forth the absolute firmness of the intuitive protector. Not all malice comes in the form of shouting. Sometimes disrespect slithers in through veiled comments, passive-aggressive remarks, or exaggerated, insincere compliments meant to undermine. In these moments, the empathetic soul does not retreat. They step directly into the light and address the shadow. They will look the person in the eye and calmly dismantle the disguised insult. By politely but firmly calling out the underlying intention, they hold up a mirror to the ill-mannered person. It is a moment of striking clarity. The intuitive soul communicates, without raising their voice, that they see exactly what is happening. They bring the hidden motive out into the open, giving the person a fair and transparent chance to explain themselves. They do not play games of emotional hide-and-seek, regardless of whether the person standing before them is a lifelong friend, a family member bound by deep ties of duty, or an imposing figure in the workplace. Truth is their ultimate loyalty, and they demand authenticity in the spaces they inhabit. To navigate a world so full of sharp edges, the empathetic soul has cultivated a powerful internal sanctuary. One of their most extraordinary defense mechanisms against the irrational cruelty of others is their profound ability to not take things personally. They possess a deep, philosophical understanding that the universe does not revolve around them, and that every human being is walking a difficult path. When someone lashes out, the intuitive soul knows that this outburst is rarely about them. It is about the heavy burdens, the failures, and the exhaustion of the person speaking. In many cultures, there is a deep understanding of inherited sorrow, a lingering grief or frustration that builds up within a society over generations, much like the profound Korean concept of Han. The empathetic observer sees this underlying sorrow. They understand the immense pressures of modern life, the crushing weight of societal expectations, and the quiet despair that many carry. By viewing the insult through this lens of compassion and broader context, They protect their own self-worth. The cruel words bounce off their spiritual armor, recognized simply as the desperate cries of a soul in distress. They refuse to let another person's bad day dictate their inner peace. They are also acutely aware of how toxicity spreads. Anger and disrespect are highly contagious. They flow like a polluted river from one person to the next. An employee who is unjustly humiliated by a superior might carry that burning resentment home, displacing it onto their innocent spouse, their parents, or even a stranger on the street. The original insult creates a devastating chain reaction of emotional pain that fractures families and communities. The deeply intuitive soul, with their hyper-observant nature, sees this invisible chain of infection clearly, and they make a conscious, courageous decision to be the one who breaks it. When they are insulted, they absorb the shock, process the pain, and refuse to pass it on. They stop the cycle of abuse dead in its tracks. Through sheer willpower and boundless empathy, they neutralize the venom. They respond to the bitter world with compassion, ensuring that the darkness they encountered does not seep into the lives of those they love. They act as a spiritual filter for the world around them, turning hostility back into quiet grace. In their lifelong study of the human heart, they have learned that sometimes the greatest act of wisdom is the act of stepping away. Human beings, especially when engulfed in stress or pain, have a profound tendency to act irrationally, and irrationality cannot be conquered by logic. Recognizing this ingrained human flaw, the empathetic soul grants themselves the permission to exit a toxic environment. They do not feel the need to have the last word. They do not need to prove their dominance in a shouting match. Instead, they gracefully create physical and emotional space. They exit pointless arguments with a quiet dignity that leaves the aggressor swinging at empty air. Of course, they are only human, and they may feel the sting of the unfair remarks. They may need a quiet moment to process the injustice, but their superior mental composure allows them to let it go quickly. They realize that clinging to the anger or fighting a battle that has no honorable victory will only sabotage their health, their happiness, and their life's work. They choose the preservation of their inner sanctuary over the fleeting satisfaction of revenge. When the initial emotional storm has passed and the dust has settled, the intuitive soul may decide that the behavior cannot simply be ignored, especially if it threatens the well-being of a larger community. Because they possess a fiercely strong sense of justice and moral duty, they will take corrective action. However, their approach to correction is deeply respectful of human dignity. They do not humiliate the offender in the public square. They do not seek an audience for their victory. Instead, they will approach the person privately. They will initiate a calm, mature, and incredibly direct conversation about the unacceptable behavior. They understand that tolerating consistent disrespect poisons the roots of any relationship, family, or workplace. In this quiet, private space, they lay out the truth plainly, yet even in their firmness, they remain compassionate. They always leave room for the person to explain, to reflect, and to offer a genuine apology. It is an invitation to elevation, an opportunity for the offender to rise above their own poor behavior and restore harmony. Behind their warm eyes and gentle demeanor lies an incredibly sharp, analytical mind. When an insult is directed at them, they retreat into the vast, quiet library of their thoughts to dissect the event objectively. They strip away the emotional sting of the words and examine the underlying mechanics of the interaction. Why were those specific words chosen? Was there a grain of truth buried in the harsh delivery that requires self-reflection? Or was the insult entirely a projection of the other person's insecurities? They study human behavior with the dedication of a lifelong scholar. This profound objectivity is their greatest shield. If their careful analysis reveals that the insult was completely baseless and senseless, they can cheerfully discard it, brushing it off like dust from their coat. But if they find a logical root behind the behavior, a hidden fear or an unaddressed problem, they will quietly shift their focus toward helping the person resolve that deeper issue. They look past the ugly symptom to cure the hidden disease. But what happens when every attempt at peace, understanding, and correction has failed? What happens when the disrespect is chronic, deliberate, and entirely resistant to grace? This is when the empathetic soul executes their most misunderstood and definitive boundary. They quietly, firmly, and permanently close the door. They cut the toxic individual entirely out of their life. This is not an act of vengeance. It is a profound act of self-preservation. They love deeply, but they value their inner peace above all else. They refuse to spend their precious nights tossing and turning, draining their energy trying to decode the cruelty of someone who refuses to grow. They simply sever the emotional cord. All access is revoked. The memories and emotional attachments are quietly boxed up and placed away. Because they absorb the energy of those around them so deeply, removing the source of the poison is the only way to ensure their own survival. Once this door is shut, it is nearly impossible to pry open again. It is the ultimate safeguard for a gentle heart in a rough world. Ultimately, their most powerful response to the cruelty of the world is how they choose to live their own lives. They understand that many people use rudeness, aggression, and volume to assert a false sense of dominance. But the truly intuitive soul refuses to grant them the satisfaction of a reaction. They see through the facade to the fragile ego beneath. Instead of descending into the mud, they elevate themselves. They choose to become living examples of civility, empathy, and unbreakable composure. By maintaining their polite grace in the face of absolute rudeness, they create a striking contrast. They demonstrate what true emotional superiority looks like. They show that treating everyone with fairness and warmth is not a vulnerability, but the highest form of human strength. The aggressive person is left to look at their own reflection in the calm waters of the empath's peace, realizing that their noise is powerless against true, quiet dignity. In the end, the journey of the deeply empathetic soul is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human heart. They remind us that even in a world that can often be unkind, we have the power to choose our response. We can choose to be the breakers of toxic chains. We can choose to be the quiet sanctuaries of peace. Let us carry this profound wisdom forward into our own lives. May you always find the strength to protect your inner peace, the grace to forgive the heavy burdens of others, and the courage to close the doors that no longer serve your highest good. May your heart remain a resilient garden, forever blooming with warmth and quiet dignity. Thank you for walking this profound journey with us today, and may grace and peace be with you always.